Hi there, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back. I'm Seth, EB Farmer. As always, moving on to the next chapter in our module here. We're going to be talking a little bit about what to do when you're in the situation of, you've got the land and it's kind of fixed up and your marketing is kind of out there in the world and you might be struggling a little bit to sell. The thing that we often do in this situation, and we actually tend to do this even before we buy the property, to ask ourselves, who's going to buy this? It's a valuable question to ask, particularly when you're struggling with marketing for whatever reason. You need to kind of step back and consider who your market is, because that often just gives you a little bit of information to work with. Marketing is a very difficult thing in that it's kind of a little bit like fishing. You're on this big invisible lake, the bottom of which you can't see at all. And you're just trying to decide where to drop your bait in. And that's kind of how marketing is to me. I think that metaphor is probably pretty apt, because when you're first starting to do it, stuff just sometimes doesn't seem to work. It seems like you're not getting any return on your time and money. And, just because you market something doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be getting a lot of calls. Now, this has to do with the time of year and other factors, price being one of the main ones. If you're not getting any calls at all, then probably the biggest problem is that your price is too high. But if you think your price is right and you're wanting to kind of focus your advertising, then you need to step back and think about who your customers really are. So that's what we're just going to chat about a little bit. We talk a lot about this in the Land Flipper in the book, and I'm just going to kind of more or less do a review of that. Some of the main people that we deal with are retirees. People who usually have lived in the city or in the suburbs for quite some time and maybe raised their children there and have had successful careers. Usually both the husband and wife have had a successful career, and they have quite a lot of money stashed away, and they may have fond memories of growing up out in the country, or just have some kind of romantic association with the rustic aspects of rural life. And oftentimes these people will come up to us on the eve of their retirement, and they're saying they're about to make a big life change. So you see, when big life changes happen, well, it's like the mattress industry, right? I was reading an article about the mattress industry and why there are mattress stores on every corner and full in strip malls all over the country, right? And one of the reasons is because mattress sales are very dependent on life changes. So you're talking about people going off to college, people getting married, people getting divorced, people having children, that kind of thing always inspires a purchase of a mattress. And land is much the same way. So retiring is a big life step that a lot of people take, and when they do, they want to build their new house to retire in or whatever. And so you are going to supply them with the perfect location on which to do so. Now, sometimes retirees these days can be a little hard to reach via internet marketing. We all know that the older among us, the older generations, are not as tech savvy necessarily as the young. Now, that's a bit of a generalization, but as far as advertising heavily on Facebook and Craigslist, I mean, you should be doing that anyway, but it's not necessarily the best way to target the retiree group. Because these people are really, really great customers. One of the reasons is they'll often pay top dollar, particularly if they're from the city and they're moving out to the country. Well, $12,000, $13,000 an acre doesn't seem like anything for them, to buy a big, nice piece of land. They tend to be pretty honest, easy to work with, and all that kind of stuff. Oftentimes, a newspaper is what these kind of baby boomer types will reach for when they start to go out and look for land. And I kind of mentioned that a little bit in the video on marketing saturation. But you're going to want to make sure that you're advertising in all the newspapers where there might be a large population of retirees. Any kind of magazine, printed word is a really good way. And often another good way is Facebook, because you're reaching their kids, who then tell them about the ad that they saw on Facebook. So I mean, you should always be doing Facebook anyway, but the primary method that we find retirees contact us from tends to be printed media. They generally will have concerns about being near trailer parks, particularly if they're looking for a very quiet, relaxed kind of retirement. They don't want to be dealing with the problems that can arise from a bad, congested neighborhood. So they're going to be often very sensitive to the fact that there are trailer parks nearby or whatever, and they often have pretty strong concerns about that. As far as the school zone goes, it's not as important because the retiree usually is, not planning on having any children. But these are great customers. They tend to be really nice to work with. You'll have to think of other ways to target people who might be retirees in your area. I don't know, maybe it's a country, a country buffet or whatever where the retirees go, or maybe it's like a golf course where you always see a bunch of older people playing, or whatever it is. I can't tell you exactly, but once you realize that it's retirees who are in the market, then you can find your own ways to kind of focus fire on them. Another group of individuals who will often buy your land, somewhat surprisingly sometimes, is neighbors. And by neighbors, I just mean people who already live out in that neck of the woods. Okay, so people who are already living around the area of your land may have friends or family or loved ones or whatever who are also trying to escape out into that area for whatever reason. And if the price is right, they will often refer your property. Okay, now keep in mind that unlike the retiree, the neighbor will often not expect to pay quite so much, because remember, in their world there's few people and a lot of land, and land is something that's often quite cheap and taken for granted. So you can't necessarily get top dollar out of the neighbors, but they do make very, very good customers, and sometimes it can be a little bit dicey because they probably know things about your land that you don't. If there was something nefarious about the land's past or whatever, they could conceivably use that to kind of blackmail you in order to lower the price to some extent. And we've had those kind of situations sort of pan out before, but just be a little careful and aware that you can't really, assume. You have to assume that they've been looking at that land for 20 or 30 years and know all kind of things about it that you don't know, right? In order to target these people, the best way tends to be, obviously a for sale by owner sign if they drive by it every day, bandit signs around the area, index cards put up at little grocery stores or gas stations just around the area. So we find we also end up selling a lot of land to people who just live in that area already, or to the relatives or friends of people who live in that area. So if you can kind of ingratiate yourself with the local community, word of mouth often works really, really well for selling to the local people. The next is blue-collar couples. The definition of blue-collar is kind of changed, at least in my opinion. It used to be something that was almost like looked down upon and thought of as not a great job. But in all honesty, as someone who lived through 2008, I mean, the blue collar people are the ones who are often doing the best, at least in my experience. People who are like plumbers, people who weld, people who work in factories. I mean, the stability of these people's jobs, and I mean, some of their paychecks is, you'd be surprised. I mean, we tend to think of an office worker as somehow making more money, but you take an average office worker and an average plumber, the plumber might make twice as much. I don't know what it's like where you live, but where I live, that tends to be the case. And these people are often some of your best, most stable customers, right? They're factory workers, they're plant workers. As I mentioned before, if there's any way you can get any kind of advertising into a local factory, a local plant, a local mill, a place where blue-collar workers drink their coffee, whatever it is, that's often a really, really good way to get customers, okay? These people might not be able to pay like a ton of cash up front, but they have stable jobs, which means they're particularly susceptible to owner financing, right? You say, well, give me $10,000 down, pay me $600 a month, or even more. They can probably make pretty strong note payments. And that's the kind of thing they're looking to do, instead of necessarily having a mortgage on a big house in the city, they might just get you to finance them 5 acres and put a nice mobile home on it. Okay, so that's what they're looking for. Now, sometimes these people don't necessarily need to commute and are often willing to go out further. I'm surprised at how many mills and stuff there are just in little bitty towns and little kind of villages and stuff like that. So you don't necessarily have to congregate around the inner city or anything like that. They likely do care about the neighborhood and the school zone because young blue-collar couples are usually in the process of or have already had children, and so those kind of issues are important to them, particularly the school zone. Oftentimes these people don't build a house. They build a mobile home, so keep that in mind. You might consider going to the mobile home dealerships like we discussed in a previous video and explaining what you have, and that can often be something that leads to sales for blue-collar couples. Land home packages, which we also discussed, are something that they often do. Facebook is a really good way to advertise to young. I mean, if you can't get into the factory and you can't get into the worker, obviously that's the most direct and thus the best way. But young people, even blue-collar workers or whatever, spend a lot of time on Facebook. So if you can go to those swap groups and get your land advertised, it can spread really virally amongst people who kind of work together or are in the same socioeconomic neighborhood or whatever. So we sell a lot of land to just kind of youngish people who have trades that, I mean, I guess you would call blue collar. The phrase doesn't have the same kind of meaning as I think some people are thinking of, but I just used this picture because it was the first thing that came up. Truckers, yeah, we sell a lot of land to truckers. Now, one of the reasons is because truckers can live essentially anywhere. Truckers only need interstate access, right? So if they can pull off their truck, it doesn't matter if they're 2 hours away from the city. If the the interstate exit is only 5 minutes away, that's a huge plus for them. And not only that, but they can't really live in the city because you can't park an 18-wheeler in a suburban neighborhood. It just doesn't work. So they're looking for a place to park their trucks. So a bigger piece of land is what they want outside of the city. Blue collar workers, dude. I mean, I don't know why there's such a stereotype about them, but I mean, a lot of truckers pull in 80 grand a year. I mean, that's a lot of money where I come from. I don't know about you guys, but that's enough to have a really nice lifestyle down in the South. Probably not in New York or San Francisco, but if you make $80,000 in Arkansas, you're doing just fine. Yeah, so consider truckers. Index cards in truck stops, obviously, bandit signs close to truck stops. Facebook, most truckers are on Facebook. There might even be a trucker Facebook group. I mean, once you know who these people are, you can find your own ways of targeting them. But I just wanted to point out to you that we do end up selling a lot of our lots to truckers and people who drive trucks. This is not necessarily something that's going to last forever. We all know that the hammer is about to drop on almost every occupation that involves driving. They'll soon be replaced by robots, as most of us will. Even our land flipping instructors will, I'm sure, be replaced by robots at some point. But that's coming probably soon in the next 10 years or so, so just keep that in mind. Spanish-speaking immigrants, as I mentioned before, it's a little bit of a perhaps sensitive subject, because kind of anytime you talk about some minority group or whatever, not that Spanish-speaking immigrants are really a minority, and at least not where I live. I mean, they make up a large portion of the population. But anytime you start talking about a racial group or a national group or whatever, people get really super sensitive, and I don't know why that is, but just being completely frank with you, we sell a whole lot of our land, maybe about half, to Spanish-speaking immigrants. Now, that has a lot to do with where we're located and stuff like that, but there is something in, like, Mexican Latin culture that really places a high premium on land ownership, and land ownership is kind of a visual symbol that you've made it, and that you're an important person, and that you're a man of means. And so a lot of times the Spanish-speaking immigrants are very, very, very eager to get their hands on a piece of property, and we deal with them a whole lot. They see land as kind of almost like symbolic in my experience. Not only that, but they tend to have large amounts of cash. They work hard and they save every penny. We often joke that, there's a lot of Mexican people out there who have tons of cash stored in their mattress, because every time one of these people come up to us, they end up paying, $40,000, $50,000 cash. Now, I don't know how it's possible, but they tend to just save money a lot, it feels like. I don't know what you guys think about that, but that's just our experience, that they often pay cash for whatever reason. They're very easy to deal with. They're appreciative of the opportunity to own land. It's a big deal to them, And obviously, if you can speak Spanish, it's a huge help. I mean, you can get rich just by learning to speak Spanish, and by being able to target, Mexican or Guatemalan or Honduran immigrants who are in your local area, because they're often really looking for a kind of like little ranch-like place to call their own. Now, a great way to advertise is to go to these little local bodegas, they're called, which is like a little Spanish-American store you'll see, where they sell Spanish. I keep saying Spanish. I obviously mean Mexican. Mexican food and things like that. And these people are generally very friendly. You go in, you want to put up an index card. In Spanish is even better because these little stores often function as like community centers for recent arrivals. And yeah, so it's a great way to like get a bunch of customers because they're places where the people tend to congregate. Okay, and also as I mentioned before, if you can find like the first person this first Spanish speaker you sell your land to, you should probably approach and be like, listen, if you want to do some selling for me, if you want to be like a salesman for me, since you speak Spanish and you're in the community, I'll give you $500 per sale. And that often works really, really well as well. And like I said, about half of our sales in the Deep South are to Mexicans. They're the most likely customers to pay full cash. They have always, always, always had great experiences. And a lot of our business is with Mexican people. So just keep that in mind depending on where your location is. Investors. Now, this is really rare. We don't get too many investors coming and buying our land, but if you think about it, it's a pretty good investment. You can buy a $20,000 lot from me for cash, and you can turn around and finance it for another guy for $30,000 at 10% for 10 years. I mean, I don't know that much about Wall Street, but that pretty much beats the crap out of any stock you could possibly imagine. I don't know why more people don't do it, and every now and then someone does. Someone who just has a lot of cash and wants to invest it will buy a lot from us for 20 grand, and they'll turn around and they'll finance it for some blue-collar worker for $500 a month. And they'll end up making, over the course of 10 years, they'll end up making 40 or 50 grand off their 20 grand investment. And you just really can't beat it. I don't know why more people don't do it, but it's especially prevalent if you're selling close to like a hot, quote-unquote, hot area, like an area that's sort of expanding. Like there are areas in the country that are like quite obvious that the city is headed there, and if you can get a piece of land there before prices skyrocket, which is what the investors are trying to do, then you can often hold on to it for a few years and sell it for twice as much. So a lot of people are doing that. LandWatch, the website that I mentioned earlier, gets the most calls for investors because it's, investors are savvy. They're using Google to look for land, and it's the first pop-up that comes on Google. Sometimes it can actually be not just like an individual, but an actual company, like a mobile home company will buy your lot. They'll put the mobile home on it, they'll install the septic, they'll install the well, and then they'll finance it for the buyer. Or a building company might do the same thing with a house. Okay, so look out for that. If you really, really struggle to sell your lots, it might be worth it even approaching a mobile home company or a building company as potential investors to buy your lots off of you. You probably have to sell them for a lot cheaper than you would to a Mexican or a blue-collar worker or whatever, but it works. Yeah, they'll often pay with a bank loan or cash. And, of course, they'll be looking at the land in a completely different way from the average buyer. They're not going to be so worried whether the grass is cut and it's manicured and stuff like that, although it's obviously a nice touch. The last thing, I kind of mentioned this one before a little bit, and I just want to mention it again because it does bear repeating. We call these people escapees, which may be a little cruel, but it's people who live in a trailer park and want to get out of the trailer park. So, these people are paying rents on their spots where they put their mobile home, so they might be paying rent on the mobile home itself, which is often not that much less than a land note would be. So if you can convince these people that you're given a better deal, obviously they're going to go for it. Okay, particularly people who are like actively, ambitiously trying to get out. And they're often in a big hurry because there's all kind of stigmas and stuff that go along with the mobile home park. There's all kind of crime that happens in a lot of mobile home parks, and when people have their kids and stuff and they just get sick of it, So if you can make your land beautiful, inviting, and very un-trailer parkish, these types will fall in love with it, and they'll be willing to pay pretty strong notes. And they may be concerned with the neighborhood. Obviously, telling these people that you have restrictions against it eventually becoming a trailer park as well can be actually helpful. So they're very susceptible to highly targeted advertising, right? Flyers in the mobile home park, near the mobile home park, around the mobile home park, mail-outs into their mailboxes, signs direct, at stores around there. All that kind of stuff is going to work great. But just keep in mind when you are dealing with these people, sometimes they're going to want to take their kind of junky mobile home and put it on your land. So you have to kind of be upfront that whatever your restrictions are, that mobile home that you own already is not going to work. And what we'll often do if we get one of these people is we'll say, okay, you need to sign this document saying that your house is only temporary. Like you can put because most of these people want to upgrade their homes, but they need a place to stay while they're upgrading. So we'll say, okay, you can put a mobile home on your lot, but after 2 years, you have to upgrade to a newer mobile home. Something like that. We make the deal work because we need the money, so we make the deal work, whatever. And that's about it for this module. This chapter. We have a couple more videos in the module, and I'll see you on those. So thanks for watching. Bye.